Yeah, all good. All good. Nice, peaceful evening walk. Nice and fresh. Spring evening. It's nice and fresh this evening, and it's getting lighter all the time. It's nearly 8 o'clock, and you can see it's still light, nice and fresh. And yeah, I was just doing a bit of reflecting on how I reckon in April, it's like an analogy in football. The football season, like in April, it's like hitting that wall in the marathon, to use an analogy, because it's a really test of mental and physical strength, really, at this point. And you think of the fixture congestion, and teams could have played like 30 games throughout the season, and obviously different teams got different things to play for, so it can be pretty tough going. And I suppose in the marathon, 18, 20 mile, and it's that glycogen depletion, and every kind of step's tough, the wall, so to speak. You got to really dig in, and it made me sort of think about one time. I was on a course, I was doing an LP. I was actually on an LP course at the time, and you make friends on these courses. And one of the friends I made in the course was a woman called Chris Mitchell. She's a teacher, really, really top person. I actually done a talk at a school one time, but she was doing some work with, I think, a player at Accrington Stanley Football Club, and she said to me that they're going through a run of bad form and battling relegation. Would you like to come in and maybe do a talk and take a few sessions here and there? And I said, yeah, I'm up for it. It was a bit of a loose end and that sort of stuff, really, so to speak. So, I sort of, got involved, and I remember the sort of first session there. I gathered that sort of pressure would be on the players to stay up, obviously, and not sort of go through the trapdoor of the professional league. And come April time, it's a tough time, mentally, physically. So I remember the sort of first session. The idea was to sort of focus application effort, try and hit. And they had a good result against Nottingham Forest in one of the cups early on in the season. I thought, okay, they can hit that level. And I remember doing a physical session outside after the classroom session, and they all gave me a round of applause. And funnily enough, one of the lads playing for Akistan, Phil, he was playing at another club in the youth team, and I used to do some BTEC freelance work for scholars, and I taught him. So as a scholar at a certain point, but that's another story for another day. But I think that sort of helped, that obviously some of the players were aware that I'd worked in similar situations before, so to speak, and obviously sort of like I had that bit of rapport, because I'd sort of used to do some of the BTEC teaching before. And I suppose the season before, I was involved in sort of helping Berry stay out when I sort of joined them through the season, the first team anyway. Joined Chris Casper the season before, throughout the first season, for when he took the job as the manager there. I sort of joined him. I'd been in the youth setup there, and then joined him and sort of help them. And I'm not saying anything I did had any impact on Accrington Stanley. I played some great football. Fantastic manager Coleman and assistant manager Jimmy Bell. It wasn't an official thing type thing. I just go in like once a week or so and watched a couple of matches. And I remember it was the second last match, and I think it came down, if you win this game, you didn't have to worry so much about the final game. You stay up, and it was against Macclesfield, and Paul Ince was managing Macclesfield. They had a bit of money in Mac as well at the time. And I think the sort of winner of that would stay up, and you lost that game, was going to the final game of the season. So ideally you win. It was at home, buzzing crowd, and it was kind of a seesaw game. And funnily enough, there was another lad that I taught when I was doing freelance BTEC work as well. The education program, freelance BTEC work for youth scholars. Nick Blackburn, and he played for Mac. I think he came on, to be fair, for him. And I said a lot at half time, and good lad, to be fair. Nicky, really, really good lad, and that sort of stuff, to be fair. But football's football, isn't it? You got to do. So, yeah. Look, the moral of the story is I'm not implying that anything sort of I did or any of the sort of like contributions I made had any impact on the team staying up, anything like that, nothing like that. But it was just sort of a great opportunity, and I learnt a lot as well. Sort of too, it was an interesting environment as well. Fantastic group of lads. Really, really great football they were playing. Really good attacking football, to be fair. Sometimes it is just a sort of a fresh voice type thing, so to speak. But the purpose of the video is not to sort of like ramble on about that. But it'd be great if you're at that game Akistan versus Macclesfield at 2006-7, that sort of second final game of the season. Now, just give us a heads up if you were there, or any of the players there as well. Remember that time. Feel free to drop us a comment type thing. It was a great little cameo, really. But the whole point of the video is, I think that now moving into April, and April as well. There's so many permutations, because in April it can be, the weather can be cool, it can be hot as well. Obviously, that has an impact in terms of sort of, hydration. There's so many variables in April as well, that you've got to prepare for. There really is so many variables. Like, the players have had a long season, and mentally, physically as well, and you're going against teams also who are fighting for positions, fighting for to finish as high up in the table as they can as well. So there is all that. And I think one thing you will get generally, certainly in English football, is teams are going to play no matter where they are in the league. They're going to give a good account of themselves. There's no easy games. It's not. You could argue, you play against another team that's battling relegation, or a team that's trying to finish up top or in the playoff, is going to be tougher than the mid-table team. But sometimes you play a mid-table team, and it's equally as challenging, because they got the freedom. There's no pressure on them. So there's no easy games. They're going to give a good account of themselves. And don't forget, players at that point are playing for contracts to make a name for themselves. So no one's going to just sort of say, here you go. But sort of thinking about that, it kind of brought memories there, to be fair, of that sort of little cameo, to be fair. But that sort of first session when I went in there was fantastic. It was great. Really enjoyed it when the lads give me a round of applause, a little bit of a physical session, and it felt really good, to be fair. It gave me a bit of a buzz too, to be fair, because you just never know how these things are going to go, type thing. But they were a great group of lads, and I'm not trying to imply anything I sort of did in that sort of final run in having to do with the team, like winning 5 or whatever games to secure, staying up as, a fantastic group, and, top manager, top assistant manager, and, top people in the club. But that's just sort of like a bit of a reflection, to go with sort of my thoughts about this time of year. But what are your thoughts on this time of year? If anyone's sort of watching in, if, you're a player or a fan, and, this is, I don't like to call it the business end, because every game's important, to be fair, but the irony is, you could be flying up until this point in the league, and it only takes one bad result and it can all fall apart. You could be struggling up until this time of year, and you put a good run in and you're on the way, type thing. So I think this really is, for want of a better word, that kind of real business end, to be fair. Obviously you've got to do a lot of work to get to a certain level at this point anyway. I'm not just saying this is the only part of the season, but what I am saying is this part of the season for me is really, there's no second chances, so to speak. You just got to be so ready, so prepared. But what's your take on it? It'd be great to hear your thoughts. Feel free to sort of give us your thoughts.